Don't you think it's time for the city of Savannah to have an honest tourism management plan? Let SCAB start paying its fair share? And the hospitality industry needs to increase its wages? The impacts of new growth should not cost residents. All local elected officials on council and commission should have term limits. We're working hard to accomplish these policies. We need your help. Please contribute whatever you can, $5, $10, or $20, by going to bettersavannah.org. Donate. Thank you.
I appreciate our tourism community. I appreciate our hoteliers.
The following show and broadcast is a production of Better Savannah, an independent expenditure committee dedicated to better policy outcomes at the state and local level. The views, opinions, and statements made by the hosts and/or their guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Better Savannah.
What's up, everybody?
Hey.
It's Thursday, June 2nd. This is episode 88 of the Better Savannah podcast. If you're just joining us for the first time, Better Savannah is the Savannah-Chatham County area's premier independent expenditure committee, independent political action committee focused on better public policy outcomes at the state and local level. This is our first public episode since the primaries. If you missed it, you can still go back and access it. If you become a member, you can go to www.bettersavannah.org or www.patreon.com/bettersavannah and join. We did what I would call epic live stream on election night. Was led by myself, one of our members, Keyshawn Housey, and the guests included Dr. David Bringman, who won re-election to the school board from the 6th District, Professor Jamal Torre, and the blackest preacher in Chatham County, the Reverend Dr. Leonard Small. Was really a very solid conversation all the way around. And I would just encourage you, it's well worth the price of membership just to get access to that episode. But if you support what we're trying to do here, please join us in our efforts to make this a little bit better of a place to be. Robert, RG, it's been about a week and a half since the primary, so we've had a lot of time to digest the results. Give our audience your thoughts, and again, just reintroduce yourself to anybody who doesn't know you. RG is going to guest host John's off in California.
Well,
getting
high. I'm not as good as John, but I guess I'm honored to be considered to kind of standing next to his shoes for a while. But yeah, man, I grew up in Savannah. Still in Savannah as a resident. Been in my career, it's taken me to Florida, D.C., Virginia, Atlanta, and so I've had the pleasure of living in different metropolitan areas and rural areas. But ran for Public Service Commission back in 2020 alongside Daniel Blackman. And this is when Warnock and Ossaw first kicked off during COVID. So we ran that campaign and really, really enjoyed, engaging in just learning about what the Public Service Commission does, as well as just going throughout Georgia and just meeting people and hearing stories and just being able to listen to sometimes how people live and realize how blessed you are or how blessed I am. But anyway, so really just excited to be on here to talk about the issues. But my reaction to the election, the primary is it was interesting. I think I would love to talk back with George because I know we talked about that race with Kwanzaa Hall. I did not see that coming. I didn't see that coming. And so I was like George that night. I like Kwanzaa, but I didn't see it coming. And I kind of felt like B would come out of that Secretary of State election pretty interesting. It's going to be really. I think that's going to be a powerhouse November ballot thing. But Brad Raffensperger, you couldn't get any more on each end of the spectrum as those two. You have a person of color, a woman of color, versus the establishment, right, on the other side. And so they talk about that spectrum. But in the local election, I think the surprise for me, I felt like Roger would do well. I didn't think Roger would walk away with it that easily, and just really pleased to see some of the other things. But those were some of the highlights for me. That wow, this really how things kind of fell out. So
I want to start there on the screen for those who will listen as a podcast. I've got the transparentsavannah.info. It's a website run by local people. Michelle Solomon, Kevin Lavler, among them, that really tries to just highlight the local, campaign contributions that are public data. And I just want to say, John, I know that you'll probably listen to this later on in California, but pal, we finally made it, man. We are big enough that we're on Transparent Savannah under the committee pack lists. There we are. We raised about $2,500, mostly from John and I. This cycle, donations under $100 don't get publicly reported. They're not required to. And we spent all that money on Ann Westbrook. We only endorsed one candidate this cycle. We interviewed all three candidates for the school board race, but I want people to understand that, Roger Moss, raised at a minimum, this was as of 10 days before the election, he hit $250,000
that's
raised
nuts.
towards his campaign. And the PAC, so again, we're on the PAC page. Right, Better Savannah is right. We raised and spent, a little bit over $2,000 for Ann Westbrook this cycle. Right, look at this political action committee that was founded solely for this cycle. Let me get to it here. It's called Parents for Public Choice. Okay, these people raised $87,000 in 30 days. Okay, and they spent all of it. Because this is all from 10 days before the election. So they raised 87, they spent 59 10 days before the election. So they spent the other 20 in the last 10 days. So all in all, you're talking about a candidate for school board president that had a war chest of $350,000. I'm not sure. It's like bringing a water gun to a nuclear war fight. I'm not sure what $2,500 extra from us was going to do against $350,000.
Well, at the end of the day, how do I say it? I think people underestimate several things with that elections. Some people underestimated Roger. The other part is people are. No one can point the finger if you didn't, because a lot of people just did not get out and vote. That's the bottom line. We talked about it last night on the Rival. Folks need to stop waiting on the next person and get up and go and vote. The 35 votes prevented a runoff. Think about that. If 35 more people would have voted for Todd, or if 35 people more people would have voted for Todd, we would have triggered a runoff. But because 35 people or 40 people or whoever didn't go vote, that's who you blame. So pointing fingers to Better Savannah or ATR, whoever, that's crap. You got to get out there and get your church members, and I tell people this all the time. Stop waiting on the catastrophe to happen before you want to get mad. You can't do that.
Well, look, the other point too is I think it should be noted that Ty Whiteley and Todd Rhodes were separated by about 5%.
Yeah.
Okay. 22, 28%, 22.5, 20, 27.5, something like that. They both represented between a fifth and a quarter of the county, right? Plus or minus a couple of percent, right? So to line up with one of them when you see how close they were already, in a Democratic Party that locally, RG, because I one of the reasons I'm really excited to have you co-hosting this summer is that you're a little bit closer to the future generations. No offense to John, I love John. John is a wise sage and has the 30 years of institutional experience here. But let's face it, between Keisha Gibson Carter, Jay Jones, yourself, my people like me who aren't running for office but are active in politics, there is a great generational struggle here. And, both Ty Whiteley and Todd Rhodes are part of this next generation.
Yeah,
and
I
so
agree.
to pick sides, and try to boost one or the other in this opening round just seemed really hard, like a decision that could not really be justified, because both of them, I'm going to say this here now, on June 2nd, 2022, both Todd Rhodes and Ty Whiteley will get elected to an office at some point.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
I don't think David Brinkman's going to want a third term in that 6th district. Ty Whiteley lives in that 6th district. She should be 100% shoe-in for that district seat when David Brinkman is done in 4 years, right? I mean, that's clear. Todd Rhodes, Todd Rhodes was a great candidate running in the wrong race, right? Here's a guy who's passionate about youth, about programming. That is a model city council of Savannah district candidate to me.
Agree. I totally agree.
Todd Rhodes sounded like knowledgeable about, passionate about programming, and the school board it's not really the correct venue for that. The school board is about policy, the superintendent that they oversee directly, and managing relations with state mandates from the state in Atlanta, right? Beyond those three things and busing, there's not a whole lot of room to try and expand programming. That's where city governments come in, especially here in Savannah. And what I saw in Todd Rhodes was an excellent future city alderman.
Oh, I
who
totally
is
agree.
going to, bring a passion and an age range group just like you and Jay and Keisha that is much more relevant to today's Savannian. Your thoughts about this?
No, I totally agree. I think one of the things I really enjoy with Todd, and we're really good friends too, and that Todd brings a wonderful talk about a story of a Savannian who grew up, who has lived his life there, has developed a business there, who understands the youth there, who understands the parents, who has raised a beautiful family, who has been with his love of his. It's a beautiful, rooted in Savannah, just all around Savannah story. And I totally agree. I can see him being really a star in at city council or at the county level. But I think he has a bright future ahead of him, and I really think you're right on that. Even with Ty, I think Ty's passion is education. I can see Ty really coming up through school board, eventually maybe even looking at state superintendent roles. But I think both of them really have a contribution. I just can't wait till their passion is unlocked in an elected role.
Well, one thing I wanna point out, you mentioned turnout, and on the surface, you might think turnout was struggling in Chatham County, but one thing for sure, if you back out to the statewide results,
Mm-hmm.
Brian Kemp beat the brakes off of David Perdue. And in the perspective of, say, the last 24 months,
Mm-hmm.
if I had told you a year ago that Brian Raffensperger, the Secretary of State that President Trump had made enemy number one, was going to win the Republican nomination without a runoff against two experienced candidates in the Republican field, you'd have thought I was crazy. And where I'm going with this, RG, is I believe in the state of Georgia in 2022, statewide and in Chatham County, I think somewhere between 10 to 15% of likely Democratic voters crossed over and voted in the Republican primary in order to secure Kemp and Raffensperger, because at the end of the day, although they are conservative, although many of these voters will vote against them in November, there is something to be said about, in the heat of the moment, when all of the chips were on the table, meaning the overthrowing of a free and fair election, these men stood up and put country before party.
Yeah,
we don't really like them on policy. I don't really like them. They're too conservative for my taste, but I think that that statement needed to be made by a lot of. I noticed this in particular, RG. I ran a congressional campaign in 2014 for a lady named Amy Tabio. I noticed this a lot in like her age range of kind of experienced, mid 50s Democratic women. I noticed this trend a lot of women who were just, look, there wasn't a ton on our side in terms of primaries, at the top of the ticket. Warnock and Abrams, no primaries, basically. First congressional district, I don't know. It's not that sexy to me.
Well, that and this is what I will say on that. And let me speak on Brad Raffensperger. My only disappointment with Brad, and I really like the guy because he did stand up, and Secretary of State. I mean, the only thing that I will hope he never does is do a Brian Kemp and steal an election. But beside that, he is trying to steal an election with that PSC bull crap he pulled. And for the viewers who don't know, so Patty Durant, let me set this up. And this is where I have an issue with the Republican establishment in Georgia. Is you keep stealing elections, and you do it in front of us, and you do it behind the closed doors. But with Patty Durant, so Patty announces she wants to run for Public Service Commission, District 2. Well, what's his name? Tim Echols, who's the incumbent, had the lines redrawn mid-election and drew her out of the race. So she relocates, right? Because hey, I'm already qualified. You want to play hardball, so let me play hardball. So she relocates, is back in the district. So on the night before the day before the election, Brad Raffensperger has a court order to take her off the ballot. So she had to get an emergency junction to remain on the ballot, and that still is in the courts. But get this, they allowed Tim Echols to take Gwinnett County out of District 2 of the Public Service Commission and include Chatham County. Now, all of this during the election cycle. Because guess what?
Power of the majority party.
Well, hell, guess why? Because Tim Echols wants to move to Tybee Island. That's the only reason. Isn't that something?
Well, longtime followers of our show will know that, our founder and chairman, John, was, intricately involved in the studying of the voting rolls after last year's election results. And, them and the Chatham County, Board of Registrars are under investigation by the Secretary of State's office right now. So, I think Tim Echols, might be just looking for a community he can fit right in there. But I want to do just a small reading series on this topic because we, like I said, we only did one endorsement, and it was for Ann Westbrook, who, when to all candidates who lost this year, to anybody who is thinking about running, I want to point to Ann Westbrook as a example of someone who ran for office 2 years ago, was new, first-time candidate, was very guarded, very moderate, very equivocating, and came and never stopped. And she lost by 19 votes to Derek Mallow, and did so with the grace and dignity without ever making it a nasty, contentious issue. And that was a super close race, right? And so I think that goodwill and the work she's done since then, made her a strong candidate. I personally believe Ann Westbrook was going to win this race probably with or without our support, right? She ended up with about 63% of the vote. It's a ridiculously big win, 22% win. She is a clear leader, future leader here in the delegation. I think she's could be there for a long time. And I just want to point out this story. This is in the Savannah Morning News this week. It's I see Julius in the comments. Julius, it's your favorite reporter, Nancy Guan. Okay. House article, title of the article is Georgia House District 163 was hotly contested. How did Ann Allen Westbrook snag the seat? First off, just as a journalism critique, snag the seat and just, it gives such a connotation of, Democrats steal seats and Republicans win them. I just always hate this type of writing. This article goes basically on to say that she built new bridges and connections, right? Compared to her previous race. This election cycle, Westbrook's on-the-ground campaign efforts and tireless work with the local chapter of Moms Demand Action were key ingredients to her successful campaign. Westbrook also had the backing of several prominent local officials, including Etta Jackson, Linda Waddick Bryan, Nick Palumbo, right? It goes on to just, again, talk about her in-person canvassing as opposed to the more virtual campaign we had during COVID that you remember so well. But there's zero mention of the leading progressive. And again, I'm not saying this because Better Savannah is so great. It's because there's no organizations. It's because we're so weak as a Democratic Party or Democratic leaning voters. There's not really a whole lot of organizations. You got the Labor Council, you got Better Savannah, you've got, the Political Rascals PAC. I mean, there's like 3 or 4 types of these groups, right? And I would say we're probably the most successful in terms of tipping elections in people's favor. And so basically, I read this article, and Nancy Guan here, it's like writing everything but saying she got Better Savannah's endorsement, and that's a huge difference. Okay, I was looking, and let me just pull this up for you, RG, into the window. And
let me, while you're doing that,
go ahead, interrupt me, please.
Yeah, no. Well, here's an issue that the state party and in Chatham County in particular too has got to look at. If you look at the discrepancy in the numbers between a Brian Kemp and what a Stacey Abrams and a Herschel Walker, there's a huge gap. And if we don't fill that gap, or if we don't understand how to energize voters like we did when Daniel and myself and Warnock and Ossoff ran, we walked away that year of over myself on November 2.5 million votes. If we don't galvanize that machine again, we're in some major trouble, and we're going to lose this election.
RG, you live on the west side, right?
Right, I'm over in Liberty City.
Okay, so and you were born and raised there, right?
Oh yeah.
So when I read off these precinct names, you recognize this as the Greater West Side: Tompkins Rec Center, Carver Heights, Butler Elementary, Beach High School. Those 4 precincts are the Greater West Side. Okay.
Yeah.
2 years ago, in the runoff in these 4 precincts, Derek Malo received in excess of 80% in each of these precincts. Keep that number in mind. All right. Let's go to Tompkins Rec Center. Ann Westbrook, 53.3%. Carver Heights Community Center, 42.67%. Still lost the precinct, but remember, she got 18% in this precinct 2 years ago. That's a 24% increase. Butler Elementary, 48.49%. Same story. 18% to 48%.
That's your Tatumville group right there.
Yeah. That's your precinct. That's your area.
Matter of fact, well, that Tatumville group, I think that might be Mallow, one of his. That's a Mallow stronghold.
Beach High School, 55% of the vote, got 20% last time, won the precinct. So I just show all that.
That's a very low number. Mm-hmm. Go back to that and see if you can pull up Liberty City Community Center. I'm just interested to see that number. So see if Liberty City Community Center is in there.
Right here.
52.55%.
Yeah. She won the precinct.
Very telling. That's very telling.
Right, all right, so 706 voters. You could arguably call this the blackest precinct in Savannah.
That's why I say look at that one. That's very telling.
Okay, so 2 years ago, she got 18% in this precinct. Okay, so 18 to 55. Now, 2 years, in 2019, 2.5 years ago, is when John founded this organization, right? We started this as an effort to, boost the challenging candidates in the 2019 city elections. And, although everybody else was supporting Van, we supported Regina Thomas, right? She was the only candidate we supported that lost that year. We supported everybody else. And, we rolled that into 2020 and then COVID happened. But my suspicion is that, look, we have spent the last 2 years, especially once we started this as a podcast midway through that, where we started making this an episodic, weekly, bi-weekly kind of show where we're informing people. We have spent the last 2 years, the better part of the last 2 years, trying to parse through the story and narrative being sold by this mayor to inform the community of exactly what these 3 women on council have been fighting for. And I think that the credibility of our organization is approaching a point, of 8 to 10, 12% of the electorate in any given election, where we can motivate that 10 to 12% to show up and vote. And this election, to me, RG, as somebody who is not from Savannah, right, but is a progressive, believes in real equity for disenfranchised people, right? Like people in West Savannah. This is a candidate who is by all accounts, privileged white woman, whatever you want to say in those socioeconomic terms, but she got herself through law school. She came back home where she's from. She opened a practice. She worked on issues like Moms Demand Action, right? What it shows to me is that the city of voters of Savannah, just like this council, just like Keisha, Alicia, and Bernetta pushed to hire a white male city manager who was the most qualified in the finalists in that second round when they came, it shows that race is not as much of a driving factor for voting as some people, as the media would sell it to you as.
No, I agree.
Right?
I think, and I'll start with this. I like both candidates in that race. The thing that Ann did very well was Ann told her story. Ann was willing to go on these podcasts. Ann was willing to get beyond just the canvassing, and you got to do that these days. And I'll use an example. You can't just rely on signs and people who are saying certain things. You gotta do things different, because even now I'm seeing Stacey Abrams on TikTok. That's a whole generation of voters that don't care about your stupid signs. That's a whole generation of voters who are not on Facebook because grandma is. That's a whole generation of voters that if you don't address you're probably going to lose 10,000 votes statewide.
You know what they care about? Can you apply the politics of the day to whatever stupid trend is going through TikTok today or tomorrow?
That's
right?
it.
You know, can you take your message and apply it to the hashtag, right? Or to the dance, right? Whatever is going on. I'm not young enough to understand it either, RG.
Well, let me tell you how this generation thinks a lot. And what I mean by this generation, 25 and younger, and I'm not generalizing. I have a younger cousin who turned 21 yesterday, right? For every conversation I had around, me and his auntie were talking to him about drinking and responsibility and what we've been through and making sure that you're 21, go have your fun, but also be responsible. He had 5 rebuttals. So you got to be able to convince them after all of these rebuttals of why it's important to vote. That's that's really different. You know, it's no longer, oh, John Lewis got his head broken open. It's no longer people died. That doesn't resonate with that younger group. Crazy to me. But this new generation, you got to really drill down to this is why it matters to you.
I just want to throw this back up on the screen one more time before we move on to a new topic. But this is the total race. Ann Westbrook got 61.23% of the vote. Okay. This district is still like a 52%, 51% African-American district.
Yeah.
Right. And especially in a Democratic primary, the turnout, especially with crossover voting that we just talked about, right? Because remember, this race really should have had about 7,500 voters. You know why it's missing it? Because a bunch of them voted Republican to save Kemp and Raffensperger. So what you're left with is a primary turnout that was probably 70%, 68% African-American. And she gets 61% of the vote. You know, to me, this result here says that Ann Westbrook got almost 1 out of every 3 African-American voters in that district to vote for her. And that is an astounding number to think about. That's the number Eddie DeLoach damn near hit probably to beat Edna citywide. Because, you know, who is affected by crime and violence the most? It's not me, pal, living in the Emerald Zone, living in the nicest parts of Savannah. You know, so when people are rushed to judgment about, you know, let's have a revolution within the police department. You know, look, I'm all for criminal justice reform in the legal side, but you got to have a police department that's well run, you know, to protect and serve.
We talked about this last night on the Rabble. How many people? And I'm going to give Ann credit on this too, and Derek to a sense. How many people have you seen, and even myself, I'm doing this now, sit down and just listen to people? You know what I mean? Sit down and listen to the officers who are on the boots to ground. Sit down and listen to the elderly who are starving because there's not enough Social Security and Medicare is all out of whack. Sit down and listen to the people that are living in these situations and are hurting and listen to hear their stories. The least you can do is listen, especially if you're in a position of leadership, and not bring out these anecdotal things because you think they will work. No, actually sit down and listen to why is the morale low in the police department? Why do they feel undervalued? Why is it that and a lot of folks don't realize this, in District 5, where I am, you got people calling elderly folks 5-6 times a day to sell their homes. But if you don't listen to that Van Johnson, you wouldn't know that. And that's another thing, if we could speak on that, how he got on there earlier this week. I don't know if you can find that video and just talk that crock of bull.
We're gonna get to Van Johnson's peculiar thoughts on real estate in a second.
How can you live in an area and all of a sudden you just not getting phone calls? This has been going on for years.
I just want to call out Nancy Guan one more time. All right. Okay. You know, Nancy ends her article with quoting Melita Easters. You know, Melita is the founder and executive director of Georgia Windlist. I've been, you know, watching her for years on the Georgia Gang. I'd be willing to bet, you know, Nancy Guan or her editors, you know, $100 that you didn't even know who Melita Easters was until she came on our show a couple weeks ago, right? Because after the Roe v. Wade case leak from the Supreme Court, you know, we obviously knew that that's going to become a extremely relevant political issue between now and the end of the year, if that leak was real. But you know, again, so it's like you go to people we bring into this community. I'm surprised George Cheedy isn't mentioned in this article. Damn, you know, I mean, like, I just always like to call out our good friends at the Savannah Morning News. You know, anytime their coverage is a little too biased, which seems to be, you know, a lot lately. So, you know, again, a good election cycle. It wasn't the best. It could have been worse. You know, we missed some opportunities with the school board, you know, but look, we've got a runoff for Recorder's Court. We got a runoff for District 5 with Paul Smith and Teresa Watson for school board. Roger Moss is kind of a caucus of one, you know?
Yeah, I think my disappointment there, I've been very vocal about that. And it's not about individual, it's about his policy. And my fear is, and voters, people need to hear this. You know, there's just the pack that supported him. What folks don't realize is, what is it? The planned choice parents or whatever.
Parents for public choice.
Public choice. That's basically saying that we want to take money out of the public schools and give them to the private and the charter schools. Okay, well, if we're going to do that, then at a state level, let's take money from the public schools and let's give them to our private HBCUs as well as our public HBCUs who have been discriminated against for years. But we don't want to have that conversation. But see, when that conversation comes up, then it looks different. So,
when did gun control really become an actual policy? It became, you know, when the Black Panthers started arming people, you know, under their constitutional rights. I mean, you know, gun control started in California. It's like one of those liberal states in the union. You know, it's this whole, we have this policy ideology until you appropriate that same logic and ideology and policy towards your goals and your ends, right? You know, I mean, it's you know, good for me, but not for thee, right? You know, it's always it's the same double standard as the historical norms. Go ahead.
Well, I think the thing is, I think Roger Moss will be a one-term person. We have the district.
I disagree.
You don't think so? Well, he's not going to get past those district seats. We're protected there.
No, I agree. So we're going to agree there, right? Like, I think Roger Moss is going to be going to enjoy the same favorability levels that Joe Buck did. You know, Bill Doors wrote about this a little bit. Roger Moss is just well liked. Okay. You know, even when Barack Obama's, you know, political ratings, his job approval ratings were lowest, his personal likability numbers never really hit lower than 45%. His job approval might have been lower than that, but his likability numbers, and that's kind of the way I feel about Roger. Roger is just so likable. I think he'll serve the 2 terms. I don't think he will have the votes on the board to make radical changes. I think the biggest thing that may change, and I think it's going to come down to the 5th district runoff of this, I think Ann Levette's time as superintendent may come to an end. I want to point out for people, she's been in the role for 3 or 4 years. The average superintendent does not serve much longer than that in this country. So, you know, if she goes 5 or 6 years and then moves on, that's pretty normal, you know? So, like, I don't know that that's a bad thing or not. I don't have a dog in that fight with the leader of our school system.
I don't either. But here's the thing: we've got I'm one of these people. I don't like to hear. Well, that's just been the trend. I get it. It's almost like college presidents. College presidents do a 10-year term and they keep going. But I've seen far and few between that have maybe done 15 or 20, which is very rare. Hampton Institute is one. Hampton Institute in Virginia. That president there was almost 20 years. Anyway. I would like to see Ann do a 10-year term. We've got to stop doing that kind of crap. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's going to be a real contentious relationship, though. I'm a big supporter of Ann Levette. I think she's doing a really good job. And again, it's one of these Todd Rose stories. She came through the system. She went out, got her education, came back well qualified, and pretty much, in my book, in my personal opinion, she's probably one of the stronger, more poised superintendents I've ever seen in a long time.
I certainly think she is much more relevant to today's student than Lockamy was. And Lockamy was there for 20 plus years. So I think I understand your point there. I think the point we're making and agreeing on, though, is that, you know, Sean Kasmar ran unopposed going into his 4th term, I think, right? Dion Hoskins Brown, Connie Hall, right? Dr. Howard Hall, just re-elected. Dr. David Brinkman, just re-elected. I don't see, and this is a mix of black, white, Republican, and Democrat that I just named, right? That's a very wide diversity of people I just named on that school board. I just don't see them following Roger to some dramatic new era of radical change. Do I think things will change, slightly for the better? I sure hope so. I sure hope that Roger follows through on the rhetoric that was backed by $250,000, of demanding better excellence in the schools. I'm interested to see what that looks like. I just hope that he, trusts the leadership and the board members who've been there a long time across all different spectrum of viewpoints. Because like I said, Sean Katzmar, lifelong Republican. Michael Johnson, definitely Republican, right? And these are people who have been on there for a long time. So it's not like, he's coming. It's not like 2019 in the city where we got 7 out of 9 new council people and we're looking for a revolution. And now we're going to have a contentious fight afterwards because we didn't get it. I don't think this is the same story as 2019, city. But speaking of the city, because I know, you're looking to run, for citywide alderman, post one. Keisha Gibson Carter, who's in that seat, has announced her intentions to run for mayor. And I know that this is your bro. I'm in a D9 fraternity, just like RG is. Yeah. The latest and greatest, Iota Phi Theta, obviously.
I think Jay Jones would disagree with you.
I mean, I'm sure Lester Jackson, my favorite Campo in town, would as well.
Oh, but, man, we ought to do a show with all the 4 of us.
We should. We should definitely do a show.
And bring on Mondo, because, man, let me tell you, Cello,
I don't think he wants to come on here, but I'd welcome him on here anytime. You're welcome on here anytime, Cello.
Well, Pyro and Zatar are like one chapter. I
love Pyro. Shout out to Joseph Wilson, super old head who brought in Cello and them, or maybe they brought him in. I can't remember. Definitely Mondo brought him in, but we getting off track here. But I know that this is bro. I tagged you live during this press conference because I watch Van's press conferences every week. And I try to be fair. I wrote in the same comment section the other day, Van, I appreciate Van's continued reminders about hurricane season. We've had 2 category 5 hurricanes brush up by us. We've been evacuated twice. The second time, most people didn't evacuate. If we were ever to sustain a Katrina-like event, it would be a disaster here, So, I'm not always 100% against Van. It's not personal. I just don't like this guy's policies and his politics. And I for sure do not like selective amnesia in my politicians. So let me pull up this video. This is the mayor's press conference. And there's a lot of different angles here about Van Johnson's thoughts on real estate, on the real estate market. I'll talk a little bit about that on the other side. But I want to play it for a couple minutes here to get through to the part about the rent is too damn high.
For this day, and I may want to entertain any questions you may have.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, I was listening to you talking about folks getting peppered with these proposals to buy their homes. I'm in Baldwin Park, and I got a lot of neighbors that are older folks. They're getting those. I get at least 2 or 3 a day. A lot of the folks that are getting them are thinking, this house is getting to be too much for me. It needs this, it needs that. I can't afford it. And you also mentioned that you have a program to help people do these jobs around the house. I wonder, first of all, what's the maximum that it would be allowed? Say somebody needs their house painted, or a lot of these folks don't even have air conditioning in their homes.
Well, it depends. Let me go to your first point first. So, and we know as people get older, the kids are out the house is too much. The way our housing market is right now, they could sell that house on the market. It might be a little bit more involved, but the fact is they'll get a bunch more money. When people are investing, particularly these folks, They go, because I've tried them. I know what my houses are worth. And so when I tell them what the house is worth, they don't want to purchase it for that. They want to purchase it for well below what the house is worth. And really the gimmick is, quick, cash offer, we're going, no closing costs, we're going to move this thing along. But the fact of the matter is that you're giving up your house, but you're giving up your equity, you're giving up your value. And so, we have some great realtors here in our city. They work well with a variety of populations. If the house is too much, call your realtor and sell it where you can get the most value for your home.
So I work in real estate, RG. I know you know this. Many of our listeners know this. I don't like to mix the two by advocacy of my professional life. But the process that the mayor's talking about here is essentially called wholesaling real estate. Okay, it's gotten really big during COVID. It's a dramatic side hustle that can launch into kind of a real estate type career. I've seen it go really well. I've seen it go really badly. And a lot of people are looking for, schemes and trying to get over on people. And that is true. However, I will just say, for the mayor of this city to come on this press conference and try to give blanket, I'm not going to call it financial advice, although you could construe it as such, but to give blanket real estate advice to his citizens with little to no credentials, I'm not sure how healthy that is.
Well, let me give me 3 minutes on this.
Go ahead.
And my District 5 people will appreciate this. My father, who built his home in Liberty City brick by brick, floorboard by floorboard, loves his house. He built it for his wife. And how dare you tell someone who has been in that experience, oh, just go sell your house if it's too expensive? Are you fucking crazy? And excuse my language. That's how I feel about it. How dare you go to an elderly person to just go sell it if it's too expensive? That pissed me off. I didn't see that part. But the other part is this. You also talking about District 5. And every elder in District 5 has told me since I was a small child to never, this is a single family dwelling area, and that's the way we want to keep it. But you've had people like Estella Shabazz go and have it rezoned behind our backs just for to fill her pockets. That's another thing that pisses me off. But the third thing is this. If you listen to the people that live in these areas, Mayor and Alderwoman, you could realize that maybe you can get up off your lazy behinds and go find some grant money to help support these people who are getting put out of their homes. Find money to help them get these bills paid. Find money to get these houses developed in a way that they can be livable. That's how you serve your community. But to tell someone to just go sell it, that just irks my nerves, and it shows that we got to get these folks out of office.
And we were discussing off air, about the affordable housing crisis that we face. And I mentioned to you that over the last decade, Mayor Van Johnson has voted for and approved $250 million in bonds to prop up the tourism district downtown and for the new arena, right? So if we can play banker to all of these other commercial interests, why have we not decided to play banker with our own citizens, with the housing market, so that we can shift the equilibrium? Okay. The problem with the housing market is there is zero supply and a ridiculous excess of demand. You cannot do anything about market forces until you correct that imbalance. All right. I mean, you can try all the rent control in the world. It's not going to change that market dynamic. You have to build the supply yourself. And the best way to do that is accessory dwelling units. That's why the city's been having all these meetings, and all the NIMBY folks, not in my backyard folks, are trying to limit the expansion of these because, they just not in my backyard. If you go to other cities, our size and larger, I'm telling you, accessory dwelling units, it's making sure that lanes have more livable units in them in these residential areas. It's going to increase property value. It's going to give income sources to Savannahans that deserve them, especially our retired elderly folks on fixed incomes. And ultimately, if we build 3, 4, 5, 6,000 of these type of units over a 5 to 7 year period, that's going to bring housing prices, especially for rent. I'm talking about rent. Remember, like, just because you own a house, the majority of people in the working class don't. They rent, you know? So when we raise that millage rate at the city, you know, that's the rent that's going up, you know, for the most part. So I just put all this to say out there that, you know, there's a lot of, I think, disconnection between the average folk and this mayor. Let's hop back into this real quick and listen to this.
Okay.
And so the house sits there. You always have one person who's paying the taxes, but they can do nothing with the house because you have 99 other heirs. And so we're going to have to work with people to help them make sure that their houses are dealing with issues that are consistent with their wishes. You know, we've used eminent domain. People talk about it, but the eminent domain is a function for us to be able to clear title, just to make sure that we clear from 100 heirs to no heirs. Then we're able to now clear the title, and the house can now be, you know, bought. It can be renovated, you know, to somebody who's going to take care of it. So again, we have a whole host of activities and things that we do. We ask people to call our housing office. I think it's 912-651-6926, 651-6926.
That was one other thing that's been sort of on my mind a lot, because like I said, I talked to a lot of older people in the neighborhoods, and when I'm on stories especially, there's a lot of really good information out here. There's a lot of services that are available to people, but most of the folks that I'm talking to, they're not going to be able to get on the computer and find these things to most of them don't even know how to access these websites on their phone or a tablet. So
you're right.
They're sort of overwhelmed. And when you tell them, well, there's this, and you give them these web addresses, the first thing they do is you can see their eyes glazing over, and you just know they're not going to pursue it. Is there any other way to reach these?
No, you're right. And so I'm looking over the city manager. I think this creates an opportunity for us to put something within phone bills. I mean, our water bills. We have an opportunity to really talk about housing opportunities, so we can put that in there, and I think we can do a better job through our senior citizen centers as well to provide that assistance. We have Golden Nation is around the city, and we have staff that we hire to work with these populations. So we'll commit to making sure the information goes there as well. We have Senior Citizens Incorporated, which is a nonprofit. They do Meals on Wheels.
So, you know, again, just we're just going to put the information on your water bill, and that's what's going to get it to you. You know, RG, I know, I'm not trying to, I don't want to get too personal here, but I know that you have experience with dealing with elderly family members, right? And I'm just trying, I don't have this direct experience lately, so just give me some perspective of how you would go, how your uncle would go through this.
Well, let me paint a very clear picture. And this is, I'm not going to tell too much, but just to let people know how stupid that sounded. Go sit down. How stupid that just sounded. I have two elderly parents. One who is 92 tomorrow with Alzheimer's. The other who is 95. How in the world do you expect a 95-year-old who uses a walker to even understand a water bill that only comes, by the way, once every other month, which then makes it look very large for him? So what that means is, by the time they're that age and they're tired, and in his experience, he's tired, he's lonely, his wife is dying, and he has his capacities, but he ain't thinking about no doggone, I'm going to look for my water bill, see, I'm going to fix my roof. That's dumb. What that does mean is and everybody doesn't have a family member to come in and help. I navigate that space. And luckily, because of my age and ability to do things and all of that, I can navigate that, but everybody doesn't have that. So again, leadership requires us to say, okay, aldermen and alderwomen, how do we solve this? That might mean we got to go out to these community meetings. Look at that. Oh, you got to do some work. We got to go put hands to ground, feet to ground. That's why we elect you. But again, we got people in certain seats that don't understand it. One of the things that really touched me with Alicia and Keisha was this, and I have not seen this in a long time. When that young lady was killed over in Yamacraw, to see Keisha put her life aside, Keisha put her family aside, Alicia put everything on hold to go stand with those people. That means a lot. And they weren't doing it for a photo shoot. They weren't doing it because they needed a nice picture for their car. They did it because they care, and they felt those families' pain. That's leadership, and that's the part. This guy knows better, and I'm just lost as to is it you waited for this long to get this seat, now you have it, or he just is lost. I don't understand it, but he knows better than this. And again, I go back to what you said. I I look at this mayor as a personal person. I don't have an issue with you. As a leader, you suck. It's the bottom line.
Well, I mean, look, I think that the voters of this city, as evidenced by the results of 2019, expected a dramatic shift towards a progressive new day. And we have not seen that. Again, I'm loving this juxtaposition of the 2019 results for city council versus this year's results for school board. The school board results tell me Roger Moss's goodwill and money gave him enough of an edge to win outright, but the voters were not giving him the board members necessary to institute a real radical takeover. If the voters were really looking for a radical takeover, Dr. Tanya Howard Hall would have lost, Dr. David Brinkman would have lost, and Trey Burrison would be in a runoff for 5th District instead of Teresa Watson and Paul Smith. So, I feel like this mayor continually misplays his hand. We're talking about a guy who in the opening round of 2019 elections got 43%, which means almost 6 out of 10 Savannahans did not want to give him the go-ahead to be the mayor. So I've never really felt that he had a firm floor that far north of 50% here. What I have said, and I'll continue to say, is that in the heat of a crisis, in March of 2020, April 2020, when COVID first was coming on, and we didn't really know what we were going to do, it's hard to find people who will go against the sitting mayor. I call it the Ray Nagin effect, right? Ray Nagin was the mayor of New Orleans during Katrina. During the aftermath of Katrina, you couldn't find anybody saying anything bad about him because he was getting up on TV and yelling and screaming, standing up for his citizens, right? His political career went nowhere after that. I feel that Van's he peaked too early because of this crisis. And the more and more he has to govern without embracing the ideas being put forth by his opposition on council, I just think it shows the citizens of this city, that he really cares more about his own political career and the future of it, whether that's state or federal politics, who knows, to me, it's just it's a blatant misrecognition of the signal and message the voters sent. The voters of Savannah sent a message: we need radical change at City Hall, and he's not delivering on that at all.
No.
Go ahead, keep going.
The reason I can't get it just blows my mind is you live in these communities, you're neighbors to these types of people, but then again, I also look at this, and I tell people this all the time: when that same individual was your alderman, that same individual helped engineer this plan to be at that arena then. And mark my word, I said this about Yamacroft, Carver Village. You better step up. That arena is not going to sit there without a pretty little parking lot or side piece to it. But again, this is the same person that engineered all of that. I don't understand it. But again, and I say this, and I hope it's going to make some people pissed. But this is the same thing for the police chief. It's hard for me to believe that someone who can be an implant to the city would care enough about it as we do. Now, that's not a general statement, but until you realize that the west side of Savannah, what I mean by the west side, from Alfred Eli Beach to Wren area, all the way over down to West Savannah. So in Savannah, it's west side and it's West Savannah. That area has not ever had any resources poured into it. It's looked the same all the time. And then people are so wondering why. Well, why are they so upset about putting the Salvation Army over here? Because you've never given us really resources to do anything beyond. But now you want to tear us down even more by putting a homeless shelter, and by the way, put it on the land of a historical site. Like, come on, how much more slap in the face can you give those folks, those residents? And when you realize that and you understand it, that's a different level of care and respect for history that a New Yorker I don't see understanding.
All right, I wanna see if I can get this last piece of Van's. Here we go.
Egregious increases in rent, often to the tune of several hundred of dollars in a very short period of time. And while this practice, unfortunately, is completely legal in Georgia, it often imposes additional and unreasonable hardship and stress on those who can least afford it. Very few people in our community or anywhere can absorb an immediate 20, 30, 40, in some cases 80% increase in rent. So while we do what we can to seek legislative remedies to help people, as our Housing Savannah Task Force and now Housing Savannah Incorporated finds ways to create affordable housing, we have to do what we can by working with our community partners to make sure housing, is affordable.
This is real fucking rich, RG, coming from a mayor. So the mayor here is lamenting the calls he's receiving, talking about massive rent increases. And I don't have the video because I didn't have enough time to go grab it. But if you go back in our archives, episode 40, 41, 42, last summer, they raised taxes exclusively via renters. So if you're new to Savannah or Chatham County, I need you to understand that if you own your home, you most likely have filed what's called a Stevens Day exemption. What that does is it freezes your municipal value for taxation. Which means if you bought your house for $80,000 and now it's worth $800,000, for the purposes of city taxes, you only pay taxes on the $80,000. Okay, renters, their landlords do not get that. So taxes go up every year, both on value and on the millage rate. So when they decide to keep the millage rate the same, that all goes to the landlord's tax bills. And what does the landlord do? Turns around, not just raise the rent by the tax amount, but by triple, quadruple, quintuple, as much as possible, because they're justified. So for this mayor to stand up here and tell about we need to work with our community partners on trying to avoid rent increases, when you had a chance to roll the millage rate back, which would have disproportionately lowered landlord tax bills, which would give you the moral justification to tell these landlords not to be raising rents, but you just raise their taxes. Let me give you an example, RG. Okay, If I buy a home in West Savannah today for $80,000, okay, and I rip it to its guts, I put $150,000 into it, okay, and now it's worth $225,000, and I go and put it out for rent, okay, because I don't live in it and I don't have an exemption on it. Okay, as soon as the assessment period rolls over to the new year, the county appraiser is going to pull the permit records from my renovation project and know that he has to go reevaluate my property. So if my tax bill on the $80,000, if my tax bill was, for sake of a round number, let's say $1,000, right? And now it's worth $240. Well, that tax bill is going to go from $1,000 to $3,600, right? I'm going to go to my tenant and go, look, man, I got to raise the rent $350 a month, all right? Because that's what the market is bearing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, I'm just never going to forgive politicians who help contribute to the problem and then want to come back and act like their fucking task force is going to solve it.
Right.
I'm sorry to cuss, but it's just so stupid.
No, it makes you angry because what that whole clip, that whole press conference was a big lie. It was a big lie. And again, before I said what I'm about to say, I'm separating the person from the leader. Now, what I'm going to say is this. The least I expect from someone who's elected in office is just fess up and say, you know what, we made a mistake. We made a mistake. we thought this and this and this, but to sit up there and blatantly lie and act like you don't live in a neighborhood where they're trying to buy it out and turn it into the new downtown, that's you're lying. You're straight up lying. To sit there and talk about, oh, I get these calls too, but you don't live over there. But I'm not gonna go there. But to sit there and act like it's a big crisis, it's been a crisis. You all been talking about it on the show. We've been talking about it on the Rabble. The District 5 coalition has been talking about it. I'm sure you've been talking about it with SCAD and Kessler when you've been giving them all of these freebies. So don't act like you don't know what's going on, because if you don't know what's going on, it gives us even more reason to get Keisha elected in that seat. Because I cannot understand how you get on live TV and tell these folks, I don't know why your rent going up. Just like you don't know about other things, then why are you in the seat?
$5 million. I just want people to understand the money that was raised by the city government, by the city council, not rolling back the millage rate, was $5 million. That number comes exclusively from residential rental property and commercial property. Back out the commercial, it's about $3.5 million straight from residential property. Okay? You know, you start to line that up per property. You know, every rental property in Savannah had its tax bill raised, you know, the equivalent of $100 rent increase per month minimum.
Yeah.
You know,
and
so yeah, I do see some crazy stories of 700, 800, 900 more, but everyone is seeing 100 to 200 more.
Well, here's the thing, and that $5 million you talked about, let's take some of that funding and help these elderly people who are getting, you know, in these financial predicaments. Look at that.
We need more of them, Rebecca. You know, so I mean,
Rebecca's thing.
Well, you know, it's just there's a lot of transplants who do understand this. I hope so. You know,
yeah, I agree.
But you know, again, it's not just the fact that he makes these decisions and then comes on here and wants to be the hero. It's the constant photo shots with Paula Wallace and Richard Kessler. Just like you said, it's the fact that you are trying to maintain this kind of glitzy same image that Eddie DeLoach and Edna Jackson had, that, hey, we are still pro-business, but we got all this inclusiveness now. Like to me, Van Johnson is the same policy sets as Edna Jackson and Eddie DeLoach with Democratic Party woke electorate messaging, right?
Well, here's the thing.
You know?
Here's the thing. Here's the type of mayor we need. This city's at a place right now it's hurting. You need a mayor who's not afraid to come out of the office and be in the streets, talking with the people, shaking hands, just in it. That's the type of mayor this city needs right now. Not, I want to look pretty for the cameras. You need somebody who's going to really roll their sleeves up and be in the city, standing there shaking hands with people, talking about what's going on. How do we make change? That's the mayor. That's the type of mayor the city needs right now.
I just want to, I put this book up on the screen, and I'm going to play this video for us to take us out of this episode. But this is a book, Winners Take All. I'll give you a copy next time I see you, RG. It's by Anand Giridharadas, New York Times best-selling author. He's on TV from time to time, commentating. And essentially, the premise of this book, this philosophy, and I would say a lot of kind of our premise as an organization, as a political action committee for the future of Savannah, is that in order for us to make real change here, the winners are going to have to no longer be able to win and take all. They can't have everything like they've had. The last 25, 30 years, we have had record port growth, record SCAD, record tourism, record home building, record, commercial. And the citizens are still living in 25 to 30% poverty, depending on the year. And, I just want, I know that you need to get back on the road, but I want to just play this long clip that we played several times on our show and leave people with this, kind of philosophy of what's going to have to happen. And I look forward to talking more about your plans, as a citywide alderman. So I'm going to play this. Thanks for coming on. Drive safe. And everybody watch this clip and think about it, in the context of the future of this city.
I think the winners of our age, knowing the inequality data, knowing from Oxfam that 82% of new wealth generated in 2017 went to the global 1%, knowing all of that, have been determined to help, to change, to make a difference. That's why you see every bank's got an impact investment fund. Every Silicon Valley business claims it's a humanitarian project. And yet, what I think in general the winners of our age are unwilling to do is get off the man's back. They're not willing to pay higher taxes or just stop avoiding them. They're not willing to let go of their double Dutch with an Irish sandwich tax maneuver they all use. They're not willing to pay people more to do their jobs. They're not willing to stop lobbying austerity and the kinds of public policies that we know are going to hurt people but benefit financial elites. They're not willing to actually commit to the communities that have made them as companies, and which they can now effortlessly abandon by sourcing here and selling there. What does it look like to imagine the kind of change that would involve the winners of our age stepping off that guy's back or being made to step off that guy's back? Win-win sounds so great, right? Because it's like taking one victory and then just doubling it. What could be wrong with doing well by doing good? What could be wrong with all these kind of philanthrocapitalism, double bottom line, triple bottom line? The win-win takes a situation, a concept that's actually derived from the world of trade. Like, you have ice cream, I have money, I want ice cream, you want money, and we do a deal. And in that narrow case, that actually is a win-win. That's exchange, that's market exchange, that's correct use of win-win. What has happened is that this concept of the win-win has been kind of jammed into the sphere of social change and making the world better and actually solving our biggest public problems where it has no business. An ice cream trade is an actual win-win situation. Feminism is not a win-win problem. A lot of men are going to have to lose a lot of power and privilege and the right to grope people at the office and have positions that their mediocrity did not actually entitle them to for that revolution to succeed. When everything is couched as a win-win, what you are really saying is that the kinds of social change that actually cost the winners something are ruled out. What you're really saying is the best kind of solutions don't ask anybody to get off anybody's back. What you're really saying is, yeah, tell women the problem is their posture. They should lean forward and raise their hand more. That way we don't have to actually pay them equally, because that would hurt shareholder value. What you're really saying is, yeah, let's have charter schools and, let's have Mark Zuckerberg give some money to a school. Because what you really don't want to do in the United States, I know this is alien here, is end the unbelievably barbaric system we have of funding public education by your local property taxes. So basically, the nicer your house, the better the education you get in America. We don't want to end that. So what the winners of our age do is get out in front of it by saying, no, I recognize the desire for more equity in education system. Let's not do higher taxes for public education, but let's do this new thing that they're promoting in Silicon Valley, where Silicon Valley companies pay for you to go to college, and then you pay them a percentage of your income, which used to be called taxation, but is now done as an app only for the luckiest students with the highest likelihood of repayment. And so I believe that this win-win thing, although it sounds so good, is actually part of the privatization of the solution of public problems. I don't think all problems need to be solved by the public. But when you look at a problem like social mobility, like the empowerment of women, like what trade has done to communities in this country and the anger that it has aroused, those are the kinds of problems that cannot be solved by really clever businesses or really fun apps or rich people who happen to be feeling generous on a particular day. Those are the kind of problems we can only solve together. And those kinds of solutions have been discredited by the fantasy of the win-win that allows the winners to keep standing on people's backs.
Don't you think it's time for the city of Savannah to have an honest tourism management plan? Let SCAD start paying its fair share? And the hospitality industry needs to increase its wages? The impacts of new growth should not cost residents. All local elected officials on council and commission should have term limits. We're working hard to accomplish these policies. We need your help. Please contribute whatever you can, $5, $10, or $20, by going to bettersavannah.org. Donate. Thank you.